Hi, church. It is the moment that we come to talk to you that we are kind of excited about, and we want to talk about our plan for reopening or beginning to meet again as a church. And that is exciting news for us. We have been praying and looking for that moment. We still do not have a timetable because we haven't been given one by the governor, but I thought this was the moment for us to go over some of these things. The plan that I'm going to give to you, not going to surprise you. We've talked about it together as an elder team. We've showed it to the deacon team. I've reviewed it with our staff. I've reviewed it with some medical personnel in our church. All of our church people that have been part of that process has given feedback. So we feel like we have a really solid plan. We feel very good about it. And so as we go forward, I want us, because we're a church family, I want us all to feel like we are in the know about what we are planning, even if it's not this weekend or next weekend or the weekend after that. At least we all have an idea of the plan that we are making. And I felt like it was important for us to get this information to you now, even though we don't have that date yet, because of the discussion that's happening around us right now. There are a lot of things moving forward. I know that the churches in Philadelphia, the Catholic churches in Philadelphia, have decided to meet the first weekend of June, as well as some North Jersey Catholic churches have made a similar kind of announcement. The CDC has given us some more guidance. We are learning more about the virus itself, but they have, last week they produced guidance for churches as they meet again. So there's information. It is part of the discussion. Governing authorities are having this discussion. I believe even our governor said he thought it would be sooner rather than later, as soon as they can get us guidance on it and get us back to church. And I know some South Jersey churches have started to meet, even though it isn't abiding by the stay-at-home order. But we're going to try to wait until the governor gives us that go-ahead. In the meantime, we feel pretty reasonable about the plan that we have, and we feel like it's going to fall within whatever guidelines the governor gives us. First thing I want to say is this, before I give you the kind of nuts and bolts of what it is going to be like to come back to hope. We are not trying to make it a completely, entirely guaranteed safe experience. I don't think that's possible. I don't think it ever has been possible. Every time you come to church, there is a certain level of risk, certainly with sickness or illness or any other kind of thing that goes on. So we're not trying to get into a new category here where we can tell you, come to church, it will be completely safe. But we feel like the things that we have done and talked about and said give us a reasonable amount of risk. All of life has reasonable risk with it. If there were no risk, then we probably all stay at home all the time, and even there's risk that comes from that. So why would we talk about going back to church if there is still risk of this disease? Not just because it's reasonable, but there are other things at play besides just this virus. And while we can endure some limited window of time without meeting together as a church, there is some tipping point at which it becomes, some of these other fallouts and effects become so large that they have a larger effect than even trying to save lives by staying at home. Spiritual well-being is one of those. And while the church is not a building and meeting together is not a requirement for people to be spiritual, it is part of how God designed us to function. And so when we can get back to it and we feel like God has opened the door for us to return to it, we want to return to it. Also, I think that we can start to get into the mindset that if we just stay at home, we can beat this virus. That's a little bit of pride that humans tend to have. We should be able to defeat this. We should be able to overcome this. This is just a reality we're going to have to learn to live with. And as the church, as people of faith, as people who believe we are in God's hands, we should be at the forefront of saying, let's step out into this and let's trust God to take us forward with this. So as I talk about what we're going to do, and we talk about trying to find a way to the best of our ability to begin to meet again, we're going to talk about some common sense things that aren't going to be strange or foreign to you. But let me just say this before I get into that. A couple of caveats. First one is, I want us as a church family to have grace with one another about whatever your decisions are. We as a church, and I as your pastor, am not telling you what you should do. There are some who will feel like staying home. There are some who will need to stay home. There are many who are excited to come out. There are some who maybe are more excited than they should be to come out. we are going to say that is between you and the Lord. When we open the doors, who comes is up to you. Honestly, I do not expect that everyone's going to come. As a matter of fact, I really expect that many people are going to stay home, in part because of their own concerns and in part because of some of the limitations we have as a church. There is grace for that completely. I will tell you right now, I'm not sure that all of our elders or deacons, all of our workers, our volunteers will return right away, and that's fine. Part of being a church family is that we show honor and respect for one another. It is a Christian value to honor and respect one another. Colossians 3 and Philippians 2, and there's so many passages in the Word of God about treating one another with honor and respect. And so we want to do that. Even if your opinion is different from my opinion, that's okay. All of our opinions are part of this, but we want to move forward and then let that decision be yours about what you do and what your family does in coming back to church. And so what does our plan look like? Our plan is a tentative plan, because the governor hasn't given us guidance yet. And there is a possibility that he will say some things that will add or revise, and we'll have to adjust what our plan is so that we are in compliance with what the governor has given us as guidance on those things. They're also subject to evaluation by us. As we go forward as a church family, we may start at this point and a couple weeks later say, that doesn't work, we're going to do this instead. So all of us are going to have some patience with one another, some forbearance. We need to set aside that harsh judgment, that standing in that self-righteous seat thing that comes up in places like this where everybody's a little off balance, a little bit frustrated, a little bit fearful, a little bit anxious. And so we get into these high tension things. We're going to have to, as a church family, covenant together to set all of that aside and be gracious and soft and gentle with one another as we try to figure out what's the right way to come back to church. And so with all of that in mind, I would say we know some things about the virus that we didn't know before. We know that masks work. They aren't perfect. And even though at the beginning of this virus, a lot of people were saying they aren't necessary and they don't protect you, we know that this is a disease that is spread by the aerosol of speaking and talking and singing. And so simple masks, even non-medical masks, help knock down that aerosol, and they dramatically decrease risk. We know that just from some experience. We know that distancing, spacing out, being further away from people helps reduce the spread of the virus. And we know that sanitizing helps to reduce that as well. Although we just heard last week that it is unlikely that surfaces transmit the disease. Early on we heard that it can live on surfaces for days and even up to a week or weeks. And now we find out that while that's true, it's really almost impossible for us to pick up enough of that virus for us to get sick just by touching a surface. So it's personal contact, it's people to people, and it's having conversation with one another. So we're going to sanitize, even though that has less effect than we thought, it still is something we can do to keep ourselves safe and to keep our church relatively healthy. And that's what we're shooting for. So all of that being said, here's what we're going to do. And we're going to post some bullet points on social media as well so that everybody can kind of simplify this down. So we are going to continue to live stream the 10 a.m. service so that anyone who wants to stay home can stay home and watch and join as best you can from where you are. If you are not ready to take that step into church and you want to stay home, that's going to be for you. If you're ready to take a smaller step, and maybe there are some people in your bubble or some extended family members and you want to join together, or a small group, instead of coming to a church with, say, 80 to 100 people in it, you're more comfortable with 15 people in your home, maybe that's a step that you can take. But we're going to leave all of that up to you. All I'm telling you is our plan is to continue to stream the 10 a.m. service. We are going to have two services, an 8:30 a.m. and a 10 a.m. service. The reason for that, and we talked about even 3 services, but we're going to start with 2 because we want to have enough room for whoever wants to come so that everyone can be spaced out to the appropriate degree. So 8:30 and 10 a.m. will be our services as we start. Some of the guidelines we're going to do, we've spaced out the seating in the auditorium. We have groups of 6, chairs of 6, but they are 6 feet apart so that if you're in one row, you're 6 feet away from the people in the rows around you. The auditorium is a little bit different formatted, but there are just under 150 chairs. Our auditorium's fire capacity is 350, so it's less than half of our seating capacity, and most likely not all of those seats will be filled anyway because of the distancing. So our capacity is probably around 100, 110, something like that. And I think that will be enough as we start. for us to be able to manage with 2 services all the people who are coming out. If you are of the same family or someone's in your bubble, you are welcome to sit in the same row with one another. But beyond that, sit in separated rows so that you are spacing from one another. If you are sick or running a temperature, stay home. Like I said, common sense. So if you are sick or running a temperature, maybe in the past you're like, well, I'm going to church anyway. We can't afford that. We certainly can't afford to be a center of spread for coronavirus, because that would not only look bad, but that would be bad. And we don't want to be a part of that. So if you're sick, stay home. Anyone who is over 12 years old, we're going to ask that you wear a mask while you are in the building. We're going to figure out, I know the CDC guidelines on returning to church talk about that if you can't distance, then wear a mask. We're going to start with asking everyone to wear a mask while you're in the building. And if we need to adjust that, we'll figure out adjusting that as we go forward. We're going to have and ask our greeters to man the front and back door, so just one person is touching the door. If we can, if the weather's really nice, we'll try to prop them open so nobody touches the door. But we're going to try to reduce the touch points there with a greeter opening the door or holding the door open for people as they come and as they go. We have our deacons putting together a sanitizing team for Sunday services. They are at work. I think you saw it in Hope Notes. They're asking if other people would like to help be a part of that team. And so they're going to try to make sure that our touch points and our bathrooms and other places are cleaned and sanitized between services before and after. We have hand sanitizer stations at the front and back door. We have more hand sanitizer that will be available throughout the building, particularly in kids' classrooms when we start to use those. We are going to take the precaution of not handing out salt and lights, as well as the precaution of not having coffee ministry, so that there isn't that passing around of stuff and even that congregating in the coffee room. And last but not least, we're going to encourage you, if you want to visit, which I'm sure that we want to do since we've been missing one another, to take those conversations outside as much as possible. The reason for that is some of the other things we've learned in the past few weeks is that coronavirus has almost never transmitted outdoors. I think there were something like 3 or 4 cases worldwide, with all the cases there are where it's transmitted outdoors. We also know that sunlight deactivates the virus very quickly. So if you want to have a conversation, you're much safer outside than in. And so if we get done the service and you move outside and have that conversation outside, we feel pretty confident that you're taking good precautions and you are relatively risk low for that conversation. Now, let me just say this in addition. Our beginning plan is not to have kids ministry when we start, to not have nursery or any classes when we start. Some of that's just practical. We don't know when we're going to start. It's a little hard for us to get who's willing to volunteer and who's not and who's going to be there and all of that. But some of it is we want to kind of get rolling and then step into, let's see what we can do about kids ministry. But we have decided and have had a discussion about what kids ministry will look like when we come back to it. When we come back to it, we will have a maximum number of kids for each room. Only this many kids are allowed in this room. When we reach that limit, we're going to ask kids to be with their parents in the auditorium. As a matter of fact, whenever we have kids ministry, you will still be more than welcome to bring your kids with you into the auditorium and have them sit with you in your row. We are going to do our very best to sanitize the toys after each service so that there isn't anything left over. We're going to do temperature checks for children on the way in when they check in, as well as workers when they check in, just as an added measure of reassurance that we know what we have there. Everybody is healthy as we can test in that room. We're going to try to use sunlight and fresh air to our advantage with the windows. That side of the building has a lot of sunlight, which again deactivates the virus, so we'll try to use that. Open the windows to get fresh air when we can. So we're going to try to use everything we can to our advantage. When you sign in, we will have the registration personnel type in your phone number so that just one person is touching the pad. We're not sharing those iPads, and that may create some bottleneck. We may need some patience as we check people in, but we're going to try to limit that common touch point things according to the CDC guidance. And when you pick your child up or when you check them in, we're going to ask that one parent at a time go into those classrooms. Again, we are not starting with kids ministry, but when we do, those are the guidelines we're going to start with, and we'll see what we can do from there. I'm sure we will all manage it together. And then I'm excited about finding ways to lean into what we have available. I don't know what this is going to look like this summer, but in my imagination, we are going to try to find ways to get together in smaller groups as well. Maybe some people don't feel comfortable coming on a Sunday morning when there's so many people there, but maybe they would feel okay coming out to a Wednesday night Bible study with 25 people there, or another night of the week where we do another kind of study and there's 20 people there, or something like that. So we're going to try to take advantage of what we do have, meeting together outdoors and those kind of things. As we go forward, we'll figure that out together. We are people that have heart for one another. No one wants to put anyone else at risk. I know that. And so because of that, I have very strong confidence that we will find our way through reopening, re-engaging in kids ministry, finding our decisions about VBS later on this summer, a church picnic, and all of these other meetings. We will find our way because we will seek the Lord together, we will trust Him, and we will move forward. And I believe in the end that our church family as a whole will be stronger than it ever has been before. And some of the reason that I believe that is because I believe when something like this happens, it asks us to deeply think about what we believe and what we value. Maybe we haven't done that to the degree that we've done it in these last 10 weeks or so, when church hasn't even been an option for us to get up and go on Sunday morning to church. And so now maybe for us, for the first time, we recognize there is a real living, breathing effect on our souls when we can't meet together in person. I know I feel it. And those of you I've talked to, I know you feel it. So it tells us that God was right when He said, don't neglect the meeting that you have, the gathering of yourselves together. And so as we get the privilege of meeting together again, let's not take it for granted. I know it will feel different. I know being in a service where we're singing and we have masks on and not being able to hug and shake hands and all those things that we are used to doing and having to stand back can feel awkward. But I know that we can navigate it together. I know we can navigate it with love, and I know we can be patient with one another, and I know God can use that for His kingdom, for us to be powerfully used for the kingdom of God in this world and in our time. So I'm looking forward to the day when we can get back together. Like I said, we will post these bullet points, especially about our initial thoughts to return to service, on social media. And then whenever we have a date to open, we will get to that to you on social media and in Hope Notes as soon as we possibly can. So pray with us. We're looking forward to that day. And Lord willing, we will see you very, very soon.